Okay, everybody, here we go. We're still in the Techniques of Integration webinar commentaries. We have finished a 2-hour program, number 7, and we're beginning with number 8 on page 360 of Esoteric Psychology, Volume 2. And we're dealing now with the third ray technique of integration, and we will begin with that formula. First, we'll read it through, and then offer some thoughts connected with the third ray technique. Ray 3. Pulling the threads of life, I stand enmeshed within my self-created glamour. Surrounded am I by the fabric I have woven. I see naught else. The love of truth must dominate, not love of my own thoughts, or love of my ideas or forms. Love of the ordered process must control, not love of my own wild activity. The word goes forth from soul to form, be still. Learn to stand silent, quiet, and unafraid. I, at the center, am. Look up along the line, and not along the many lines which, in the space of eons, you have woven. These hold thee prisoner. Be still. Rush not from point to point, nor be deluded by the outer forms, and that which disappears. Behind the forms the weaver stands, and silently he weaves. Okay. Well, we have a condition at the beginning of the stanza which tells of a state of imprisonment, a state which has long persisted, and which is the result of eons of behavior along a particular line. Now we have to remember that the Ray 3 soul cannot become so until the man reaches the stage of relative intelligence. The 4th ray soul or the 6th ray soul can transfer onto the 3rd ray when a stage of reasonably acute intelligence is reached. The 3rd ray type is often called the weaver, the 1st ray type the director, the 2nd ray type the teacher, maybe the 4th ray type the artist, the 5th ray type the scientist. These are generic terms. The 6th ray type the devotee, the 7th ray type the magician. This is the ray of the manipulator, or the creative intelligent agent. So there's a special ability to draw upon, to use the hand symbolically in selecting, so this is selection, in selecting the energy threads. And there are so many of these surrounding us, the ability to pick and choose which color, which quality may be needed. Picking and choosing which color or quality may be needed to weave together a certain form. So there's a constant review of the variety of colors and qualities and tones, constant review of the variety of colors, qualities, tones, and differentiated energy aspects which can be brought together into a new combination. And that's what Master Morya tells us, that creativity is the bringing together or the establishment of new combinations. Creativity is the forming of new combinations. Okay. Pulling the threads of life, ever busy in doing this, ever selecting what may be needed for the particular form which is to be created. You see, the throat center is involved here, and the throat center is a form-creating center. When we speak, we are always creating forms, and when we think with the help of the throat center, we are creating thought forms. However, as we see of the individual in this case, it represents a condition of imprisonment. That's the way it begins for all of these. This is the first paragraph or first few sentences are pre-integrative. So the first few sentences are pre-integrative. This is how it stands with the individual after a long period of incarnations, and the perpetuation of habits which keep the individual enmeshed, we might say, in the lower three worlds. So the idea here is that a statement is made encapsulating the present condition of the individual, and then the soul will speak, or some higher realization will lead from the periphery to the center. So these first statements are about the condition of the individual as he stands at the periphery of soul consciousness, in normal consciousness, and not yet related to his center point. The center point exists in the case of all of these individuals. All right. Pulling the threads of life, ever trying to decide what is needed next, what has to be brought in, what has to be supplied, weaving through the process of selectivity. Selectivity leading to combinations, or the selectivity of that which will be combined. This preoccupies the third ray type. I stand. Well, here he's standing. In all these cases, there has been a standing. I stand enmeshed within my self-created glamour. It is my own form-making tendencies which have distorted my perception of and understanding of truth. So I do not perceive reality. Surrounded am I by what I have generated out of myself, by the fabric, we might say, of thought which I have woven, and that's all I can see. And this is so important. I cannot see the thing as it is. I can only see the thing as I think it to be, and they are not the same. So my thoughts do not correlate with reality. I have this love of my own thoughts. I love activity. I love the process of generating forms on whatever level. I love the process of generating new forms on whatever level, whether or not they correlate with things as they are. Pulling all the different energies, qualities, colors, notes, tones, vibrations, whatever is available to me, pulling upon them, selecting them as I choose, pulling the threads of life, I stand Well, like Gulliver was tied up by the Lilliputians. I stand enmeshed, bound, caught, entangled. It's a good word for the third ray. Caught, bound. Yes, those words will do. Entangled, caught, bound. You know what it's like? Knotted. Knotted. In my self-created glamour, I can only move within the glamour. I cannot move in relation to reality. I move among my thoughts, which do not represent reality. I cannot move in relation to reality because I cannot perceive it, because I have blocked my vision of it through my creations, which intercept my perception. So I'm so active, I'm so generating of forms that the forms I generate provide my entire environment. Okay, so I'll just say that here. The forms I generate provide my entire environment. Okay. Surrounded am I by the fabric I have woven. I see naught else. I am blinded. So this is the conditioning, the condition of the conditioning, we might say. This represents the condition of the conditioning which has prevailed ever since the individual became the third ray soul, which he cannot be at first. We have to understand. One will be either a fourth ray soul or a sixth ray soul and make a transition onto the third ray, or perhaps onto the second ray, but the 4 and the 6 can lead to the third. So later, when we reach this ability to manipulate our environment and to manipulate thought and to create thought, this is when we fall into these problems. Now let's see what the soul suggests here. What will the soul suggest? Well, a higher and more rational, more reasonable, more wise voice is stating the following. The love of truth must dominate these wild creative tendencies. Must dominate these wild, untrue, creative tendencies. But the creativity is no true creativity and does not correlate with reality. It's the ugly carpet that is being woven here in the law of repulse, and the window breaks, and though the weaver cries aloud, the sun shines in upon his woven carpet, his ugliness is thus revealed. So let's just say that thought form creativity is not necessarily truth, but can be very far from truth. In fact, it can be a glamorous, illusory creation. So it's the love of truth must dominate, and the love of truth will subdue the wild creativity. That's all we can call it, I think, at this point. Not love of truth must dominate, not love of my own thoughts. So the third ray type is in love with his own creations in the world of form, and especially in the world of thought. Not love of my own thoughts, which obscure the truth, or love of my ideas or forms, well, these are not real ideas, but thoughts which represent, perhaps, ideas. Ideas are something else, purer, and from a higher level altogether. But we have the way of somehow talking about thoughts as if they were ideas. You say, well, I have an idea. It really means I have a thought. To truly have an idea, to truly be receptive to an idea from the cosmic ethers, is to be in touch with a great and forceful being, which, if properly timed in relation to the plan, is making its way into incarnation. Well, a thought can, with greater or lesser accuracy, represent an idea, but the true idea needs to be given form. The idea simply comes, and it is formless in terms of the kinds of forms we work with in the world of thought. But anyway, not love of my own thoughts or love of my ideas, really thoughts, or forms which I tend to create, even forms on the physical plane, because there's a great manifestational urge for the third-ray type, and they will, be involved in creating various construction projects and buildings and organizations and manifestations in the lower worlds which are made to or intended to represent some vision, some dream, perhaps even some higher contact. Instead, something else has to occur, says this wise voice. Love of the ordered process must control. Now, this is so distant from the first types of expression of the third ray. Because order is not respected, and activity for its own sake is pursued. So love of the ordered process. So the antidote is the seventh ray, with its love of order and sequence. Whoop. S-Q-U, S-E-Q, sequence. And not love of my wild activity, thinking that motion, is really action. And I can say here, mistakenly, thinking that motion is really action. In other words, I am because I move. That might be a mantra for the third-ray type. Let's say, I feel alive, vital, as if I am accomplishing something because I move. And of course, all this movement can be a method of really obscuring the truth. Okay, the love of truth must dominate, not love of my own thoughts or love of my ideas or forms. Love of the ordered process must control. And how does that ever come about? So let's say, how does this love come about? By realizing that forms thrown together through wild activity lead nowhere, accomplish nothing, and end in futility. So much bitter experience with forms that fail. That's actually how we're eventually going to learn love of the ordered process, not love of my own very exciting and constantly stimulated activity. I stimulate myself through my own wild activity. I imagine somehow that I am a vitally living being by my own wild activity, but my activity, I must learn that my activity obscures truth, and the activity of my mind obscures intuition, which is the truth. So now the soul will speak whether in capital letters or in lowercase, one way or another. I have discussed this idea. Is this word, is this part of the great word? Should it be capitalized or not? Sometimes it is in these stanzas. Should this word be capitalized? So the word, a portion of the word which the soul is, goes forth into the consciousness of the weaver, the one who brings many energies together to establish a new combination. The one who brings energies together to establish a new combination. The word goes forth from soul to form, and this is the antidote: be still. Well, if I'm still, am I alive? That is the question that many third ray. If I'm not doing something, am I even living? Is there hope for me? Is there any way to achieve if I don't do? And of course there is the failure to realize that the doing is an obstruction to real achievement in line with truth. Eventually truth has to be spoken by the third ray, and thought, the rending of the blinding veil, the clear pronouncing of the truth, and practice right will render to this blessed one that golden thread which will provide release from all the maze of earth existence. So truth, activity is a veil. The kind of hyperactivity that we're involved with the third ray, this hyperactivity is a veil and an obscuration. And do something very, very different. Who knows how to do this? Maybe the first ray knows how to be still. Maybe the seventh ray knows how to be still. The second ray also, perhaps. Learn to stand silent, without your throat center always in activity, generating thoughts and words. It's a kind of the subduing of the mercury response. There is a lower mercury response which is involved in what we might call thoughtless, mindless chatter. One of my friends says there's a whole big difference between thinking and thoughting. Thoughting is just the rather random, purposeless, undirected generation of thought, or just circulating of the thoughts which have already been created with no real directionality to that circulation. So many of us, as we chatter and just allow the throat center to get out of control, we are thoughting and not thinking. So contain yourself, be still, let's just say, use the restraining aspects of Saturn. Now, I just realized this, that the word training is in restraining. It is a type of retraining. Restraining is a type of retraining. And this, the third-rate type, he has so much confidence that his motion is really action, that he very much resists this enforced stillness of which the Tibetan speaks. Be still. Learn to stand silent, without your throat center always in activity. Quiet, so, keeping not creating disturbance in your environment. The sixth-ray types and third-ray types are very good at creating disturbance. You know, the glamour of interference with the sixth-ray type and the glamour of busyness with the third-ray type, of commotion, overcome the glamour of commotion, akin to the glamour of interference on the sixth ray. Because all this commotion really does, you know, let's just say noise interferes with the reception of truth. Overcome the glamour of commotion akin to the glamour of interference. Learn to stand silent. Trust the silence. This is very hard for the third-ray type to do. Trust the silence. And be quiet. Do not disturb. Do not disturb. There should be there should be for many third-ray types this sign. Do not disturb, as we find so often on motel room doors or hotel room doors. Do not bring in extraneous movement which upsets the pattern of truth. Do not bring in extraneous movement which upsets a better pattern of truth. And stand unafraid. Well, what has this got to do with it? Again, you know, the fear comes in via the solar plexus and to a certain extent via the sacral center. The ancient racial fears are found in the sacral center, we're told in one of the instructions in the Dhyana book. Sacral center related to the third ray, solar plexus related to the sixth, and thus related to the third. It's as if activity. What do you do? I mean, what do you do when you're afraid? What do you do? Different ray types do different things. And we might say that when afraid, the third ray type springs into action, as if the action, or springs into, let me just say, motion, as if this motion can do something to counteract the fear or remove the cause of the fear. But just running around, you know, like the headless chicken is not really accomplishing anything. So in the face of motion, action in the face of fear, well, motion in the face of fear is a type of response which is ineffective. So do not always be fearful of the environment and feel that you have to immediately adapt and counteract what is going on in the environment, but learn to really assess what is going on. There is, well, you know, it's about form. The third ray is related to form, and the fear is of the loss of form. It is the consciousness within the personality that fears death and dissolution of the form, because there's such a material perspective that it is as if in the formless worlds there is no life, and there are no formless worlds. So the great fear for the third ray is that the forms that it creates will be destroyed, and the form that it thinks it is, form that the third ray type thinks he is, will be destroyed. So the vanishing of form is the fear. Yeah, we might say that the third ray type fears formlessness and thinks it to be unreal. Well, we have humanity with its great fear of death, humanity ruled by in many respects, the third aspect, since it has such a strong personality focus. It's connected with the throat center within the planet, and that's the third ray, and connected with the Ajna center, which has also a kind of third ray function, as well as the function of other rays. So the form, when threatened, springs into activity. The form, when threatened, springs into activity. But this activity without understanding. So learn to stand silent, quiet, unafraid, observing what is rather than generating what is not. So observe what is and do not generate that which is not, i.e., that which does not correlate with things as they really are. And why should you stand silent, quiet, and unafraid? Because I, at the center, am. You know, let's just say I, the higher power, in which you do not believe, do really exist. There's so much skepticism in the third ray and the fifth ray. It's as if the inner worlds, at first anyway, do not exist and have to be somehow proven to the mind. But whatever this voice is, this voice of the soul, which is likely to be disbelieved by some of these types, it says, I do exist. I at the center am. And you know, you are such, you range in your thought around the periphery of life, and yet I, the true reality, exist at the center of your life, which you do not know exists. So the center, that which is within is that which is above. I think that's a pretty good idea. When you're going above, you're actually going within. When you're going within, you're actually raising your vibration. So once there is a belief in a particular center, what is needed here is a belief in the intangible center of existence. In this case, the soul. So the third ray type is told, now look up, and not simply into your own world of thought. Look up, look in. That which is often disbelieved. I'm reminded a little bit of a recent book by Stephen Hawking. He's very much on the fifth ray, third ray line, it seems. A very expansive mind, but dealing with that which is tangible, and also with the mathematics of the tangible, and to a certain extent with that which is etheric, but not with anything spiritual per se, or having to do with the higher planes. And he says, really, there's no need for God. All of this could have been created without some supreme intelligence. It could have come along, I suppose, simply through the laws which exist, but who knows why they exist if they were not created. Laws which exist, and through the factor of chance. Anyway, it is difficult for the third ray, fifth ray type to look within and give any kind of credit to the existence of an inner center, and especially inner or invisible entities. There are certainly types of matter which are invisible to everything except our instruments. They're certainly invisible to our normal senses, and these, the third ray and the fifth ray, can believe in very well. But it's a very, very mental bias, you might say, which discounts the reality of the intangible, or that which appears to be unreasonable at the present point of development of thought. So look up along the line, and not along the many line. Now, what is that line? Well, it's obviously, the Antakarana. Look up along the Antakarana, which leads to the intangible realities, and not along the many lines of speculative thought which you hope will lead to reality, which in the space of eons you have woven. You have woven many approaches to the fulfillment of your desires, and you have created many speculations about the nature of reality. Look up along the line, the one line. And as I quoted before from the Blessed Ones, the rending of the blinding veil, the clear pronouncing of the truth and practice right, will render to this Blessed One the golden thread, the line, which will provide release from all the maze of earth existence. So, from the many, what are we being told, concentrate the many lines into the one line, which can actually lead to the center, because the many lines have led only to eccentricity. Well, maybe it's two C's, eccentricity, or let's call it, eccentricity in a literal sense, out from or away from, out from or away from the center. These many lines, like so many ropes or threads or cords, these hold the prisoner. The many, these many hold you prisoner, and you are bewildered, and there is futility leading nowhere. D.K. warns against the following of obscure trails, as if they could lead to truth. There are many dead ends, You may be climbing a mountain or in the wilderness, let's say, and you see a trail or another trail, and you have to choose which one to go on, and some of those trails lead really nowhere. They're just cul-de-sacs or dead ends, or they even may lead in a circle and bring you right back to where you started from. So you are held prisoner by the many, you will be released by the one. So let's put it that way. Held prisoner by the many and released by the one. And again, be still. Again, there is this cautionary note sounded. It is an impressive mantram, and let's just say when you have a dog and you say, well, sit, and the dog sits for a while, then becomes restless, starts to move, say, sit again. So we're speaking to our elemental nature here, the tendency of the vehicles to be in motion. Be still. Again, I repeat, be still, says the soul. And just as the six-ray type runs straight to the periphery, running, the third-ray type rushes. So the sixth-ray type, sixth-ray type runs to the periphery, and the third-ray type rushes around with no discernible order and goes into motion on the basis of impulse. Goes into motion on the basis of impulse. So be still. Rush not from point to point in a chaotic and uncoordinated way. That's the tendency, you know. There are all these points that have to be covered, and there's no particular order in covering of them. Point to point to point to point, depending on one's impulse. It's chaotic movement, and it doesn't accomplish anything. One does not accomplish in the midst of all this chaos. No true pattern is built, and no true relationship discovered. So don't rush about as if you had lost your sense of direction, breathlessly, fearfully running from here to there. The breath is connected with the throat center. Leslie, fearfully running from here to there. Don't rush about in this way, but rather have a more ordered, love of the ordered process must control. If we have an ordered process, we know why we go from point to point. We are much more in control. I mean, it's so, the whole idea of the frenzy of activity. Let's just say the sixth ray, there's such a close relation. Sixth ray type is the what's called frenzied follower. And the third ray type degenerates into a what we call frenzy of activity. And where is the room for wise or considered thought in the midst of all this? Nor be deluded by the outer forms, anything within the lower three worlds, and that which disappears. This is the thing. This is what makes the third ray type afraid. The vanishing of the forms with which he is identified. So we'll put this here. The third ray type fears the vanishing of the forms with which he is identified. Because there's so much connection with form. Form is life. For the third ray type, form is life. And even DK has used the term life in terms of vitality and activity. It is one of the expressions of life. So there is a great attachment to the forms which one has made, as if one can achieve one's immortality, as if one's immortality is related to the perpetuation of forms which one has created. In other words, there is this constant sense of evanescence, of the vanishing of that which is apparently real. And humanity has this particular bias even now. Humanity knows that it as a form will disappear. And there is fear about the disappearance of form. Fear related to the disappearance of form. So, keep creating forms to ward off the fear. If you keep generating forms, you will be ahead of the disappearance. Keep generating forms and be ahead of the inevitable disappearance. So do not let your consciousness be captured by the outer form. The Buddha, of course, having a very powerful third ray and sixth ray also, helped to dissuade the people of his time and in later generations from attachment to that which disappears, because all that aggregates will deaggregate. There is no real security in that which must decompose. There is no aggregation in the world, the mosaic world I call it, in the world of particles. There is no security there. It's just a reflection of the true inner forms, which are the archetypes. It takes a while, though, for the third ray type to look within and find it to be reasonable to go there, nor be deluded. So it's so often the glamour of materiality, the glamour of the reality of the 18 lower subplanes. This is what the third ray types suffer from. And even the word number 18 sums to 9, which is the cyclic number of the third ray. So we have the glamour of the reality of the lower 18 subplanes. And only later does one realize they are not real, but are derivative of the true, what we call them, true Platonic forms in the archetypal worlds. But first the consciousness is captivated by the tangible. The consciousness captivated by the tangible. So don't be deluded by that which is outer, but learn to look within at that which disappears, because behind the forms, the weaver, the true weaver, who is the soul, stands, and silently he weaves, silently, with the divine plan clearly in mind, he weaves. So learn the same wise, percipient, acute consciousness of the weaver, and weave only the forms which the plan needs for its right expression. So it's been always interesting to me how very verbal and off at the mouth some Sagittarian types can be, and how later it is said to be the sign of silence. The Stymphalian birds are killed, and the wild thought form generating activity is subdued, and there is this perceptive silence, or silent perception of truth. It's very much like the third ray, and from this noisy, excessive use of the throat center, all the way to something quite different, a wide consciousness which is aware of all the many contributing threads to any situation, and the refusal to use the creative power of thought and of mind and of word to create any form, but the kind of form which will be immediately useful in the expression of the divine plan. But it's quite a journey, isn't it? From the noisy, inconsequential use of the throat center to a deliberate Saturnian, magical Uranian use of the throat center for specific purpose only, and towards a kind of silence which is very uncharacteristic of the early expression of the third ray. So we've moved into a state of integration now, when we can weave as the weaver weaves and integrate all of our activities accordingly. Is go here to Esoteric Psychology, I suppose, about page 360 or so. Yes. And I'd like to simply go over this section. Just see what comes to mind, and then simply read it. Simply read it. So, pulling the threads of life are the many qualities of energy, the many streams of energy, coming on rapport with many streams of energy, applying them in a concrete form, objectified energies, or applying them in a more subtle sense, as there are many who can pull in, let us say, subtle energies and somehow combine them. But anyway, having many, many energy types, vibrations, qualities, strands in hand, and I suppose in mind, in a way. I've been doing this for a long time, millions of years. Well, maybe not millions. It all depends when one can become a true third-ray soul. I think millions of years are spent upon the rays of attributes before there is a widening out towards the rays of aspect and a change of soul ray polarization. But anyway, I'm all tangled up because I pulled so many threads in a wild and often irrational desire-prompted way. I'm all bound and entangled by the threads I have pulled in. The many, many energies and the forms that I've created out of those energies make it impossible for me to move. And of course, movement is what I love the most, being the third-ray active type. I stand tangled up, enmeshed, almost woven into my own fabric, so I can't disidentify from it. I stand enmeshed within my self-created glamour. Nobody did this to me. It's my own irresponsible, unplanned, purposeless creativity, desire-prompted creativity that has done this. And it's glamour because it distorts the vision of reality entirely. I don't know what's real anymore because my own thoughts masquerade as the real, or I take my own thoughts as the real. Surrounded am I by the fabric, by the thought form substance which I have woven, by the cheetah I have shaped in some way, woven into form, and also by the many forms of a more tangible kind which represent my thoughts, my ideas. So I'm surrounded by many creations, by a lot of stuff. I'm surrounded by a lot of stuff. Or a lot of thoughts. I can even choke on all of my thoughts. I hope I'm not telling the truth here and about myself. Little throat center reaction there. Surrounded am I by the fabric of thought and of more dense substance which I have woven and created, and I see naught else. I don't see reality, I just see what I've made. Maybe I love what I've made, but it's not what is. It's not the thing in itself. I'm caught in the world of symbols. And the symbols I can't interpret, and they don't lead to reality. I've just made a lot of forms which are blocking the light of truth and the light of reality. They are repelling the intuition, and I can't apprehend the true patterns because I see so many of my rather ugly patterns not knowing they are ugly. The love of truth, says the voice, or some perceiver says this. It's not the man, it's not the aspirant who is in this mess, really a mess. The word mess is used for Maya, unthinking emotional mess. Mess is related to the third ray, mixing everything together. Well, the fourth ray can help too. It's the ray of the mix. The love of truth must dominate. It's not how things are now. Truth comes from the higher world and represents a higher pattern which I did not make. Someone else made it. The deity made it. I'm only interested in my own creativity and not the creativity of the deity at first. The plan is the creativity of the deity, but I'm not interested in that. I'm just interested in my own wild creativity. Unregulated creativity. The love of truth must dominate and not love of my own thoughts, which make me think at least I'm doing something. And if I'm doing something, I must be alive. And if I'm alive, I'm not dead. And I'm not fading away out of tangibility. And I'm not disappearing. The existential angst concerning annihilation or disappearance. In other words, if form exists, I am. If I make forms, I am. And I persist because the forms I've made are there. And even after I'm dead, I persist because somehow I live through the forms I have created. We understand very human thinking in this respect. So love of truth must dominate, not love of my own thoughts or love of my ideas or forms. Not real ideas here, but thoughts as I think they may represent ideas. And I work in the world of thought and I work in the world of reality, and maybe I even put certain things together on the astral plane as well. I'm busy arranging, rearranging according to my desire. I'm busy fabricating, you might say. A fabrication is somehow come to mean to be a lie, and the third-rate type is at first not known for its truthfulness. Rather, it fabricates. It makes things up. You know, how I'd like to see this is. It's not how things are, it's how we represent things, and our attachment to how we represent things rather than how things are. So we almost consider the intrusion of the truth as unwelcome, because it breaks up our own limited perceptions, and it threatens the thoughts we have created to preserve our own immortality. The love of truth must dominate, not love of my own thoughts, or love of my ideas or forms. Love of the ordered process must control. A very seventh-ray type of love, the love of sequential, purposeful, well-planned process, not wild activity, and that seventh ray must come in and somehow rescue the wildly entangled creative individual from his own creations. We know in the magical process we are in danger from our own creations unless we can liberate them from our own aura. They can drain away our vitality. They demand to be fed, and they will take our energy. So love of the ordered process instead of my wild activity must control, not love of my own wild activity making me think that somehow I'm alive and therefore immortal because I am in motion. I move, therefore I am. Okay. Well, I guess to some extent that's true, because the universe is a movement, is a pulsation. And the absolute Venus has no movement. It simply is, has no parts. Without parts there can be no movement. Well, that's one thing to say about it, but probably the opposite is also true when dealing with the great paradox. Anyway, the word from the soul goes forth. The word goes forth from soul to form. Really good advice. Counteract everything you've done before. Just stop. Stop it. Just stop it. Be still. These are strong, commanding words, because your activities, your motions, are just an obscuration on that which you seek to achieve, namely the truth. You obscure reality through your activity. Learn to stand silent, keep the throat center in stillness, quiet, cause no commotion, no disturbance, unafraid that if you cease acting, you will cease to be. I'm looking at this as deeply existentially as I can. Why is the third-ray type afraid? Why is the sixth-ray type afraid? Sixth-ray is afraid of getting lost and being excluded from the opposite polarity, which is heaven, and somehow being trapped on the outer periphery, excommunicated, you might say, the great penalty from the sixth-ray church. Learn to stand silent, quiet, and unafraid, as if somehow motion could calm your fears, and assess the situation as it is, and rather than through the thoughts you put upon it. Be receptive. The mind, like a spinning wheel, DK tells us in Esoteric, in Treatise on White Magic, can cast off all who approach it. It's not love. So it banishes the approaching one. Rather be receptive. You know, with a barrage of words and thoughts, the mind is so filled that there can be no real receptivity in silence. because we have to be receptive to the center which we are and have not detected. The soul says, I am at the center. You didn't know that. I'm at the center. You were so engrossed, immersed, enmeshed in your own irresponsible creativity that you completely blinded yourself to what can only be appreciated in silence and quiet, and with the fear vibration subdued. And look up along the line, which is now your connection to the center. Remember how that Ray 1 line connected to the center, the Ray 1 part of the process, resolve the many into the one. And your many lines of approach to whatever you wanted before, and even to what you thought were truth, all have to be gathered together, the many threads, into one thread, into one strong cable which leads to the center. You are in desperate need of oneness, we learn. So bring the many together into the one and find the center. Look up along the line, the antichronic line, and not along your many lines of thought that really lead nowhere, which in the space of eons you have attempted, you have woven, you have tried to go this way, you've tried to go that way. And the sixth ray is similar. It says, I try all ways. I try this way and try with force that way. What shall I do to find the way? It's very similar to the third ray in this respect. And so you can understand why the third ray, sixth ray does resolve some of them into the third ray types. So find that one line which is the golden thread, which leads through the maze which you have created with your own thought, or through your own interpretations of that which God has created. In a way, whatever God has created is utterly transparent when we achieve the intuition, but not when we're caught thoughting all the time. I owe that to my friend Michael Weisenberger, who's a deep thinker from Australia. I'll always remember the difference between thinking and thoughting. These many, many lines that you have generated hold thee prisoner. What are you a prisoner from? You're a prisoner from reality. You're held away from the real. You're held in your own self-created glamour and illusion. You are banished from reality, and you are the one who's holding yourself there because of all of your errant creations. You know how a knight errant is often on the sixth ray and rides off on the sixth ray on a particular mission, and it may lead nowhere. Well, thus it is with the third ray speculations. I have a theory. Well, what about your theory a week later? Did it lead anywhere? I'm reminded of Einstein. You know, he worked so hard, you know, very much third ray, of course, and he worked to create a unified field theory. Well, it never really did work out for him. But there were times in his life when he said, I have it now, I have it. And he'd work on it, I have it. And then maybe a week later, I don't know, sometime later it disappeared. It was a trail that led nowhere, really. It was a kind of an intuition maybe that spawned a theory, but he couldn't find his way. The path that he thought he was on didn't lead there. And I'm sure that's the experience of many creative thinkers. So your manyness holds you prisoner. And again, admonition from the soul, be still. And rush not from point to point, because you're rushing under the impulse of fear. There's a certain breathlessness here. The throat center rules the lungs. It involves adrenaline, I suppose, related to the base of the spine in some way. It's the fear of annihilation, really, you know. Maybe that is the great existential fear, but if you're so bound to form, as the third ray types are, bound to one type of form or another, what do you do when they're all gone? You cease to exist in your own eyes. So don't rush chaotically from point to point with no real program or plan or sequence. There has to be instead love of the ordered process, and proceed from point to the next rational point, the next needed point, instead of just, I have all this to cover, so I'll go here, 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 here. And somehow through my activities it'll all get covered, it'll all get done, see? Maybe there's a difference between how seventh-rate people pack a suitcase and how third-rate people pack a suitcase. maybe scattered all over the house are the things that have to be what? Not folded and put in an orderly manner in the suitcase, but thrown into the suitcase. Rush here, rush there, gather this, gather that, this thread, that thread, the other thread, throw it all in, there it is, a mess, but it's all there. I'm speaking from experience. Anyway, rush not from point to point, nor be deluded, misled by the apparent reality of outer forms, because they're not real. You're holding on to that which disappears. You're thinking the most important thing is the tangible thing, and it's not. It's what's behind the tangibility. It is the form, the true form, the Platonic form, the standing wave of cosmic etheric energy within the world of being. This is the true form, but you don't know about that. You're deluded, and you think that reality is what you see, and it's not. It's something else. So don't try to hang on to that which disappears. Go with the Buddha on this one. He's the great third-ray monad with the sixth-ray mind who is telling us that there's no hope in hanging on to what appears to be tangible. Behind the forms is where you should seek. The weaver, the true soul, stands, and cognizant of all the many energy threads and how they must be precisely and artistically and elegantly woven together in order to create a manifestation that is in line with the divine plan, that weaver stands, weaving in that way. Not simply creating a lot of thought, simply for the sake of creating thought. He knows he's immortal, and he is in alignment with the substance of the plan. With the plan as a particular pattern which must emerge, and he knows that in these lower worlds he must take his fingers, his hands, his throat, his mind, and bring together that which must be brought together to provide the proper clothing or expression for that which must be. And his own lower thought form generating powers will simply get in the way unless they are in perfect alignment with that which he sees must manifest in time and in space, an entirely different perception, and silently he weaves. It's a very different psychology, and we see how far we've come from this mad pulling and tangle and all that to this beautiful, orderly, silent, all-cognizing process of the silent weaver who is arranging all things in line with the divine plan without any sense of rush or hurry, but in a well-timed manner. Of course, Saturn is the main ruler of or distributor of the third ray, and it is the planet of timing also. It's the Mercury part that's rushing here and there. Mercury has, I think, a Ray 3 personality, and I think ultimately a Ray 3 monad is my guess anyway, and is involved with going from here to there, and maybe irrationally so in the beginning. It's the Mercury part to which the frenzied thinker, the frenzied creator of thought, is responding. Behind the forms the weaver stands, and silently he weaves. Okay, so let me read this then, because it is, after all, I think, important for humanity, humanity which has been under the impression of this ray, intelligent humanity, for a long time. Pulling the threads of life, I stand enmeshed within my self-created glamour. Surrounded am I by the fabric I have woven. I see naught else. The love of truth must dominate, not love of my own thoughts, or love of my ideas or forms. Love of the ordered process must control, not love of my own wild activity. The word goes forth from soul to form. Be still. Learn to stand silent, quiet, and unafraid. I, at the center, am. Look up along the line, and not along the many lines which in the space of eons you have woven. These hold thee prisoner. Be still. Rush not from point to point, nor be deluded by the outer forms and that which disappears. Behind the forms the weaver stands, and silently he weaves.